Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and I am joined, as always, by the one, the only, Brandon Anderson. We're going to be talking NFL Wild Card Weekend, basically between college on Thursday and Friday and the games on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. This is heaven on earth. So let's start right there. We're going to get to those best bets shortly, but first we've got some fun to chat about with some trends, some stats, and other betting markets up all across in different sports books right now. Just fun, different prop bets for this weekend stuff. I want to first start by saying, first of all, Brandon, what's up? How are you?
I'm great. Heaven on earth, still in North Dakota. Speaking of heaven on earth. So, yeah, ready for the games. Rocking my Texans shirt while I still can. I'm not sure we're going to get to use that one too many more times these playoffs. Spoiler when we get to that game. But, yeah, we got a lot of really fun football coming. I'm excited to dig into it. Just the next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Just football all day, every day.
Amazing. And yeah, don't spoil much because we got unlimited bets coming up here. So I will first say this. So me and Brandon recorded an episode, I think 2 days ago, on NFL futures. So if you're looking for to win the Super Bowl, to win the conference, Super Bowl MVP, we discussed all that stuff. It'll be in the description as well if you want to click that link, or in the feed, just an episode or two below this one. And also, we've got quick sip links in the episode description. So if you want to tail any of the bets that we are giving out on the show today, just look for those links in the episode description. Listen, it's super easy. Just click the link and it'll open up a bet slip for you to tail in the Sportsbook app itself. It is truly auto magical and a great invention. So please check it out. And with that, let's go into our first topic here. So on FanDuel, there is something called Futures Fusion, which is basically just a bunch of different props where they've kind of tossed together different result possibilities in the bracket. So, Brandon, I've got a few of these that I kind of find interesting, and I did a little math to try to just figure out, is there value on some of these? Because they are a little weird. But I'll let you go first. I mean, what were you thinking of when you see all these props?
Yeah, honestly, for me, normally when I see these fusion types where it's like any 5 seed to win the title or anyone from this division, normally to me, I go the other way. I'm trying to get rid of outs. I want the sharper odds. I want the longer bet. So, but I did find two in here that I like. One of them should be pretty obvious if you listen to the Futures podcast. There's just a bet Ravens or Eagles to win the Super Bowl, plus 260. Easy starter for me. That's my Super Bowl pick, is those two teams. Hopefully that's how we turn out. Then we're just cashing regardless of what happens there. And then the one that's a little bit more than that, Eagles to advance further than the Bills, is plus 145. Now look, the Eagles have the tougher matchup this weekend. Clearly, we'll get to those games. But after that, it flips. After that, you would rather have the Eagles here. So if they win this weekend, suddenly Buffalo's probably playing Baltimore and then Kansas City after that. You much rather prefer the Eagles matchups, and we'll get to those in a bit. So I like those. I just think the Eagles are a much better team than the Bills also, despite the matchups this weekend. So those are the two that caught my eye. What'd you see?
Yeah, this is all about who you like. And once you know who you like, you kind of go digging in to see where those bets kind of lie. So one of them I do like is Ravens to beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game and the Lions to win the Super Bowl is 30-1. And I kind of like this just for options. So Detroit is going to get most likely Green Bay, Washington, Minnesota Rams. They'd be about minus 300. Then they've got Philly, Tampa, hypothetically, which are, minus 200 range. And then you've got obviously the Super Bowl. KC's got one game to win to basically get into the AFC Championship game for this bet. And then Baltimore, it's a minus 500 and then a even bet against Buffalo. And then you're in the game to basically almost decide it if the Lions get to the Super Bowl. Basically, with all those different situations, you get to about 20 to 25-1. So I actually do think this bet has a tiny bit of value into it. And Ravens, Chiefs, and Lions are pretty much the teams I kind of like in this scenario. I also like the Eagles, but I think at 30-1, it's worth the price. The other one I liked was your Eagles and Ravens, so we don't need to go into that any further. The other one that was a little longer, I thought was interesting, is Lions to beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game and Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. That's 90-1. So if you like the Rams anyway this weekend, which I'm kind of leaning, I do think this one holds a little bit of staying power with the Lions having the bye, the Chiefs having the bye, and it's basically a Rams bet this weekend. So I think those are the two that are most intriguing to me. The other one in just the FanDuel section before we move on to the next category, I'm at least going to put a few dollars on every team to score 1+ rushing touchdown in the wild card games this weekend. it's an outlier. It's almost never going to happen. It's also 200 to 1. So I think in this scenario where it's the playoffs and teams are a little bit safer, I do think getting through a game or two, there might be some options, but I like the bet. It's long. All right. Next category here. We're talking about playoff stat leaders. So I'll let you go first, but I just want to say the way I attack this is I looked since 2020 when we started with the 7 teams, 1 seed bye format, and kind of just looked at who won these different categories. Because I wanted to see, were there any players that played 1 game or 2 games? Like, what was the minimum you needed to win these categories? And then I kind of worked backwards from there, but I'll let you start first.
Well, I actually I didn't get a chance to do that. I'd be curious to hear because I wondered that and didn't have time to get into it. So give me some of your numbers.
Okay, so you've got basically 8 winners over the 4 years. So that's passing yards and passing touchdowns, rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. So if you look at teams to play 3+ games, they were 7 of 8 for passing, 6 of 8 for rushing, and 7 of 8 for receiving. So almost in any scenario, you need to have played at least 3 games to win any of these categories. The 2 outliers, which I do, or the 3 outliers, which I do find interesting. One was receiving touchdowns with Jake Ferguson. I believe he had most of those in one, or all of those in 1 game last year. And then the other 2 were rushing touchdowns, which I think is probably a more volatile market. 21 was Singletary, who only played 2 games, and 20 was Fournette and Kareem Hunt. So Kareem Hunt kind of got into the mix with just 2 games there. With that being said, I can toss it back to you. I mean, I just think whoever you're going to take most likely has to make it a few games in here, obviously. And you also, the thing that's interesting to me is like KC and Detroit not playing the game. Like those teams most likely need to make the Super Bowl probably to have a good chance. So toss it back.
Yeah, so some of the guys that caught my eye here, and that makes sense. So basically, again, you're looking at who do I like? Who are the teams that I like? And then which are the players that line up for these categories? Because, yeah, you got to like the team to win at least a few games and give you a shot here. I mean, theoretically, your receiver could have like 250 yards in 1 game and lose. But if your guy has a 250-yard game, they're probably going to win. So it's all pretty correlated here. So looking back at the futures, who do I like? Well, I like the Ravens. Henry for most touchdowns rushing is plus 470. I don't hate that. That's probably the right bet. Like you said, rushing touchdowns are volatile. I don't know if I need to invest in that one. Like, I think that has the best chance of winning any of these that I'll say, but you got to win at least 3 games probably to get there. I don't know if I really need that for that short of a number. The one I like better, even though he'll need to get to the Super Bowl, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown receiving yards plus 950 is a really nice way to invest in the Lions. Look, we know they're going to have to win shootouts if they're going to go far. And I gave out Amon-Ra St. Brown as my favorite Super Bowl MVP bet on the last podcast that we did. He averaged over 90 yards a game receiving last year. If the Lions get to the Super Bowl, I'm probably not going to like them there. But that's okay. That's actually even better. More passing yards from Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think that's a pretty good one, especially where the top actual receivers, I don't expect to go long into the playoffs. Couple others that caught my eye. We know I like the Packers. Jordan Love is 24 to 1 on passing yards, and Jaden Reed is 100 to 1 on receiving yards. We'll come back to Reed a little bit later. If you think the Packers can make a run, obviously it starts with having to beat the Eagles this weekend, but I think either one of those, if they make the Super Bowl, like you would definitely want to have invested in those ones. Even if they get to the NFC Championship, that'd be a pretty good setup. And then the last one, I think I actually hit this one last year. Travis Kelce touchdowns, 13 to 1. Is a terrible number. Travis Kelce is a postseason touchdown monster. He averages like 1 per game. And the only thing with that one is he's not playing this weekend, obviously. So again, you probably need the Chiefs to get the Super Bowl. That's fine. They're going to be like a game away from being able to do that. But this market opens back up usually each week. So if we wait and someone has like 2 touchdowns this weekend, they kind of have to put Kelce's price even longer because he hasn't played yet. So that's my only hesitation, but that's probably my favorite one because that's one that he just is a touchdown machine. He gets a touchdown or 2 almost every playoff game, it feels like. Who'd you see here?
Yeah, you've said a bunch of mine, but I think you said something smart there. And I don't have the data. I would have to probably dig too much to even look at it. But I would almost guarantee that some of these Lions and Chiefs do get longer
Yeah.
next weekend. So if you like any of those, which I agree with you, I like Kelsey receiving touchdowns. I also touched Kelsey receiving yards. I think he's around
Yep.
30-1. He is, if when looking back at these categories, he's won these awards in 2020 and 2022. He won both. So, I mean, Travis Kelsey is 100% an option here. Now, there's more options in KC, but it's the playoffs. I still think Kelsey's going to find his way.
Yeah.
In rushing yards, I took two chances, which would be Jaden Daniels at 130-1. And Joe Mixon at 55-1. Obviously, both of these players need to go deep into the playoffs to even have a chance here. But kind of like Washington, and I think Houston and the Chargers is a toss-up. And if Mixon goes a round or two, I mean, he's going to get a ton of looks here. 55 felt a little long. And then the other volatile markets were receiving touchdowns and rushing touchdowns, which I honestly think you should take some more chances in. So I wrote down people like Jamison Williams at 38-1. I'm going to take a piece of both Likely and Andrews because I just can't take one of them, even though I'd probably rather Andrews, but Likely at 27-1, I think has value. And I like him to score this weekend. In the rushing touchdown avenue, I'm also going Jaden. He's at 50-1. I think Kyron at 14-1 and Aaron Jones at 29-1. Just intriguing options. Again, Derrick Henry gets there, like he's most likely going to win this type of award. I'm not necessarily interested in, I think he's like plus 280. I just think it's just too short. Might as well bet him to score 2 touchdowns in some of these games.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at the markets here.
Yeah, I mean, I think betting touchdowns as volatile is always going to be a good idea. So just trying to find the right guy. The one guy I had on my list I didn't mention is Gus Edwards, 130-1, where it's like I think he has scored in 3 of the last 5 games. I know J.K. Dobbins was out, but J.K. Dobbins could be out again. I think basically what you're looking at is here, if I like a team to possibly make a run, like I gave out Packers, if I think a team could win 3 games, make it to the conference championship as a surprise team, we get that. We get like a team like that nearly every year. How could I bet that in a more aggressive way than just betting them to make the conference championship or just the money line rollover? So I think that's smart to say, okay, well, what about Stafford passing or what about Jane Daniels rushing? Like, if this team makes a run, why did it happen? What's the story? And let me bet it with some of these crazy long numbers. Because really, the entire point of this exercise here, why I like these markets so much, is we're betting on small samples. So this is not the time to bet favorites for the most part. This is the time to bet wild outliers where you're like, like Jaden Reed, I like his matchup this week. And if he has one good game for like 120 yards, you're suddenly like halfway to the total you might need to get to. You might get there even in one more game or get close to it. So I think these are fun markets to bet because it's isolated, but I think that there is big edge there where if the favorites just go to the end and get 4 games, especially this year with the Ravens as good as they are, but not a bye week team, then that's going to be a problem. If Josh Allen plays 4 games, he's probably going to win some stuff, right? But
Probably.
I think that there are options here with the long odds and with the small sample that make these fun markets.
2 more things before I move on. One, I kind of do like Dontavian Wicks. I had him at 80 or 85-1. Without Watson, if you like Green Bay, I just think that's a good option. I don't like him for receiving yards because I think Reed's the better bet. But I think from a touchdown point of view, Wicks will get some decent targets with Watson out. And I was wrong about Kelsey earlier. He actually won in 20, 22, and 23. In most of these categories. And then in 21, it was Cooper Kupp. So basically, it's only been Kelsey, Cooper Kupp, and Jake Ferguson who have won any of the receiving categories in this stat. So
Ferguson, who I believe caught like 3 second-half touchdowns in the Dallas blowout loss, and that's basically
one
the only
game.
reason he got there.
One game. Yeah, unbelievable. We assume that won't be happening again here. And there were more random running backs. So I do think there is an option in the running back category. Okay. The next really just topic we're going to talk about here, and this one's pretty simple. Which of the quarterbacks of the 12 playing this weekend do you trust the least? I went pretty simple with this one, but I'll let you go first.
I mean, my heart answer is Sam Darnold because I'm a Vikings fan and I do not trust my guy Sammy, not after what we just saw Sunday night. I think the right answer has to be with respect or disrespect to Russell Wilson. There are 2 rookie quarterbacks starting on the road in playoff debuts this weekend. I gotta say it's Bo Nix. I've been giving Bo Nix the disrespect all year. I already picked against him. Spoiler, I'll be picking against him again in multiple ways coming up when we get to that game. Just rookie quarterback that I didn't think was a first-round pick, that I think has not played well against top teams. probably not in a winning script sort of game. That's a tough spot for Bo Nix this week, and I think he's got to be the answer to me.
Yeah, except Bills defense, but I guess we'll see what happens there. The only way I really attacked this was I kind of just looked at turnover worthy throw rate and just said to myself, like, when you say trust a quarterback, well, what does not trusting a quarterback mean? And that means basically turning over the ball on some level. So, turnover worthy throw rate for the entire season. Darnold is the highest among quarterbacks who made the playoffs at 4%. It's then Love and Stafford. And then you just look since week 10 at turnover worthy throw rate. Darnold, still at the top of the list at 4%. Hasn't changed at all. Same quarterback. Second, though, and the only quarterback 3% or higher that made the playoffs since week 10 is CJ Stroud, which I think some people might look at as well, but the answer has to be Sam Darnold. So let's move forward here. You're going to talk about wild card round blowout trends. So I know you've got a few different things here, and then I'll kind of back it up before we get out.
Yeah, so this is something that's going to play into some of my picks coming up. If you think that we're going to simplify on the picks and just go some spreads and totals, nah, we've done escalators all season. We're escalating today. We will get there. This is what caught my eye looking at some of these escalators. So it feels to me like this weekend is the really fun weekend of football. Finally, the playoffs are starting. And it feels like in my head, hasn't this kind of been a dud the last few times? So I dug into the numbers and looked at it. So last 3 years, there are 6 games this weekend, so 18 games over 3 years. 11 of the 18 games of the last 3 years have been decided this round by 14 or more points. Here's the margins that we've gotten. 14, 16, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 23, 23, a 30, and a 31. We are getting blowout games. That's almost 2/3 of the games. Only 3 out of the 18 games have been under 7 points, and one of those was 6. So we had 2 1-point games. Everything else is 6 or longer. Average margin of victory the last 3 years in the wildcard round, 14.5 points a game. Median margin of victory, 16 points a game. So 3 years is not a lot of data, but it is since we just expanded the playoffs to the 7th seed. So here's what I'm wondering. Are we letting weaker teams in now? Is there a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots? And that's why we're getting these, because if they are, we should be betting it and exploiting that as bettors. So I think that this is something real. I don't think it's just a small sample.
I do think the blowout in the wild card round is a thing. I think you also have larger spreads.
Sure.
So like I would be interested going forward being like, okay, 9.5s, 8.5s, and kind of breaking it down that way. But I do think whether it's the underdog like we saw with Green Bay last year or the favorite, I think you're just more prone to having an oddity in matchups in the wild card round, and it creates some wild scores. So I tend to agree.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So we'll come back to 2 of the longer spreads this weekend that I'll be playing escalators on when we get there.
All right, now last category before we go into your best bets. These are just divisional hypotheticals, which on FanDuel and I think a few other books, they've already got lines posted for the divisional round. So my just initial thoughts before we go into this, what scenario do KC and Detroit's lines get bigger with them not playing? I think is one interesting thought going into this. And then the second is this also really isn't like, what is my favorite bet? Because it's more of a market play. Like if I like Baltimore, Buffalo under 52.5, but I think it's going to close at 54, this is probably not the time to mention I like that bet because you're kind of trying to get something ahead of time. That's the way at least I looked at it. So what do you think here?
Yeah, I mean, this is effectively the look ahead. Like, this is the way that we usually close out this podcast. So I agree with that. Like, you're looking not just to get the bet that you want to make. Like, I see a lot of other websites and content do their early week picks. It's like, okay, no, that's just who you like best this week. But I didn't need the rush to grab that right now. If I'm making an early pick, like, I would rather pick right before the game because I'm going to have my most information. I'm going to have injury updates. I'm going to have all the stuff then. If I'm picking early, it's like you said, because we think this line's not going to be available later. So I looked at the numbers. I ran my model up against the numbers. Hilariously, I had 3 games on FanDuel that caught my eye here as games that were like 2 or 3 points below what my number were and spots where it might move past a key number. And I say hilariously because they're all featuring the same team. So the 3 that caught my attention are all Eagles games, and they are all betting on the Eagles versus whoever they'd play the next round, which I think makes sense because the Eagles, to play the next round, would have just had to beat the Packers, who I think is a very good competition for them and a win that people would take seriously and maybe bump their lineup a little bit. And Eagles possibly will play either the Rams or the Vikings. That's an extra rest game. And it might be an especially extra rest game. Thoughts and prayers to what's happening out in Los Angeles, but we don't know if that game might get moved or might be in sort of bad air or what's happening with that one. We'll talk about that one Sunday night. But Eagles against the Rams is -6.5. So if that one jumps, that hits past the key number. Eagles Vikings -3.5. Not such a big deal in that one. Eagles Bucks -5.5. That's another one where if it moves at all, we're crossing the key number there. So all three of those games, I have like 2 or 3 points more to the Eagles. So that would be my pick right now, is just Philly to win. And also because I think another thing to look at is I'm a little tenuous on Philly right now and Green Bay because of the quarterback injuries. But if the Eagles are playing next week, presumably Jalen Hurts must have played this week. Otherwise, I didn't think Tanner McKee took care of the Packers. So I guess I have to assume the health got them to the game and feel better than I maybe do right now as well. So I like any of the Eagles plays for next week. What caught your attention?
Just 2 unders. I do think that Baltimore Buffalo 52.5 is just kind of intriguing. It might close higher, so maybe it doesn't even follow my own advice. But they're both top 5 in rush percentage, and it was kind of the angle I was looking for in these playoff games. They're usually a different style than the free flowing regular season. And then the other one, again, this would be indoors, but Detroit and the Rams, it's 53.5. It closed at 54 when we saw this game last time, and it was a 26-20 final. And the thing that most would surprise most people, you're getting Montgomery back, and Detroit is also 7th in rush percentage. So as much as they do throw the ball, if they get a lead, I do see that game kind of slowing down more. And Kyron Williams getting literally 1 trillion carries and them kind of switching it up a little bit. So those are the 2 I looked at. But to me, trying to get ahead of some of these things, because again, this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this market, you're getting your money back if the matchup doesn't happen. So,
Right, exactly.
I mean, you're basically taking a shot.
Yeah, you bet all 3 Eagles games. You're getting guaranteed a refund on 2 of them, but when the games are over, because you can only get 1 Eagles matchup. You might get all 3. If the Eagles lose, you don't lose the bet. You just didn't make any of those bets because these matchups are never happening now. So, by the way, the Rams Lions 26-20 was overtime, I think. So really the total was 40 in regulation. So way below that number.
Yeah, and be careful with a lot of these markets, and definitely read the fine print, because some of them you're getting your money back, and some of these bets, like betting a touchdown to the Super Bowl, is actually action. So just please make sure you read that. All right, best bets time. Chargers, Texans. The only thing I found interesting here, which kind of just lit up in my Bet Lab systems, was the fact that the Chargers are playing the 3rd straight road game. Those teams are 39% straight up since 2003 and 3-6 straight up in the wild card round. So that is my, do you feel like they're tired? I mean, they did play most of their starters from their last game. Like how much of an impact that has, I'm not exactly sure, but I found it intriguing. So what are you thinking with Chargers Texans?
Yeah, we're just going to kind of go through the games in order here and kind of hit, I'll try to give at least where I'm leaning on a side, even if I'm not playing a side. So we talked about this game already. I took the under 44.5 on the hot read. Yeah. That's the direction I'm leaning still to. So let me kind of get into that. This is the very shaky early Saturday field game. Like, I don't know which team is more this game, the Texans or the Chargers, but it's perfect. Chef's kiss that they are in this game together. I do think that both defenses have the advantage, though, especially as I dug into it. Both pass defenses, I think, really have the advantage. Run defense can be beaten, but not by these teams. The Chargers and especially the Texans have not run the ball successfully this season. The Chargers' pass defense has been really good. I think especially Jesse Minter with a chance to prep for this really anemic Texans offense that's been disappointing. Chargers have been top 5 against wide receiver 1 by DVOA, bottom 3 against wide receiver 2. They're also number 1 in the league against the right side of the field. And I think all that matches really well with Houston. CJ Stroud skews heavily toward the right side of the field, and the Texans have really one receiver. So if you can take away Nico, there is no wide receiver 2 for Houston right now. They're all injured. So I think that works pretty well. Chargers defense also been way better on the road this season. They're 2nd in DVOA versus bottom 10 at home, actually. So Houston's number 1 at home, Chargers number 2 on the road. So a lot of that sets up for the under. Before that, two other things that I just think are key advantages for the Chargers. I just prefer the coaches for the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh has been here. I trust him. DeMeco Ryans, look, I know I got the Texans shirt on, Texans Island last year. These are both conservative coaches. I do think that helps the under, but but I don't really trust D'Amico and Bobby Slowick in those decisions they're making. I think, too, Houston starts strong, but they fade hard in the second half. They're 4-13 ATS second half versus 13-4 first half. Well, the Chargers also start strong this season. So if they can hang, then when the Texans start to fade, which let's be honest, it's the Chargers, they may still fade too. That's kind of their thing. But I think that sets up well. And I do like the Chargers tackles offensively against that pass rush just to be able to kind of hold up on the edge. So under 42.5. If you didn't get the under 44.5, I think it's still an okay play. These teams are 20-14 to the under combined on the season. Houston has had 10 games already, 44 points or below. The Chargers have had 11 games already. I mentioned kind of their home road splits for the Chargers too. Chargers home games are averaging 46 a game, road games 37 a game. So pretty big disparity where their defense is showing up. And I think that fits the Jim Harbaugh thing. Okay, we're on the road. It's a tougher environment. Let's shut it down. Let's play defense. Let's just grind it out and get the win. I do think both offenses are a little bit fraudulent here too. If you look at just when did you play a top 12 DVOA defense? Houston averaged 16 points a game in those matchups, and the Chargers were under 20. Between them, they had 12 games. Only once did either team score better than 23 points. So I think we're getting like a 20-16, 21-19 sort of game here. So I will start out the way we started last time, under 42.5, Houston and the Chargers. You can play that with a quick slip. Evan mentioned that at the top. Just click the link right there in the podcast or on the video, and also in the podcast link. It just pops it right in. The pick is right there for you. So under 42.5.
Yeah, it is interesting. We have two dome games in the wild card weekend with Monday Night Football, Rams, and the Vikings, and then this game, but a difference of like 5 or 6 points in the total. So I think it's probably telling you something. And we like this at 44.5. So makes sense here. All right, next game, Steelers and the Ravens. So listen, from Pittsburgh's point of view, I mean, Mike Tomlin's coached five playoff games. He is 0-5 straight up, 0-4-1 against the spread as a dog of 3+ points. Now, no Zay Flowers. That news came out today. Lots of different angles to take here, but to me, what do you think about the Flowers news and your bet here?
Yeah, I think the Flowers news was expected largely, so I guess it didn't really shake me a lot.
Sure.
We kind of talked about this already when the games happen on Sunday. I think it's a loss because Pittsburgh's corners are not great here. And Baltimore, I think it takes away some of their explosion down the field. I also have never been the biggest believer in Zay Flowers. I know he just made the Pro Bowl, but like I'm not exactly putting him in like Nico Collins territory or someone like that sort of receiver. He's good, but I think that this is a Lamar Jackson system type thing more than it is a Zay Flowers thing. They need him back in future rounds. I'm not that worried in this matchup. I know all the stuff we talk about in this matchup every time, all the Steelers, Ravens, and the rah-rah and all that. I just don't think it applies here. I think the postseason is a different thing altogether. So we start with the under. I took the under 47.5 on the look ahead, down to 43.5 now. I don't need to touch that anymore, but we know that that's the direction these games usually go. I don't feel bad about that because Pittsburgh's offense is just going to have a really hard time scoring here. You had a question for possible for us in our rundown of just Pittsburgh's team total. Will it go over under 16.5? Pittsburgh has faced a top 12 defense 6 times. They're averaging 15 points a game. They've yet to top 20, and they also yet to top 20 in each of the last 4 games. So Baltimore's defense back half of the season, number 2 by DVOA. And I think that they will take care of things. And as far as like the rah-rah Tomlin matchup rivalry stuff, first of all, this doesn't even really fit the rah-rah trend for me. I know they're underdogs, but that trend for me is better at home. They're on the road. After a big loss, they just lost by 2, and as underdogs of 7 or less. None of those things fit here. And you had the stat in your article, Tomlin 3-14 straight up as a touchdown underdog or worse. He's also failed to cover and lost 5 straight playoff games. And as far as the Steelers not showing up against great defenses, the Ravens have. The Ravens have been quite tested this season. They're averaging 28 points a game, 30 or more points in 5 out of 8 games against top defenses. Against playoff teams, they've been really good. And Pittsburgh especially has been terrible early, especially in the first quarter. So I just see a lot of versions of this game that match the one we saw a few weeks ago, where it kind of gets ugly, gets away quickly. So here's the bet. Ravens minus 9.5, and then we're taking the Ravens escalator. Now look, my numbers don't get here. I make this -4.5 for the Ravens. I should be hammering the Steelers. I just don't think that necessarily can just blind trust your model here. You got to trust what your eyes are seeing. And my eyes are seeing a team that's already in the postseason or are already in the offseason for the Steelers. Lamar Jackson, 69% cover rate against teams better than 500, 80% cover rate in cold weather, 40 degrees or below. Lots of trends here like the Ravens. A wild card rematch. Home teams that won the last game by 14 or more, 73% ATS. We just had that game a few weeks ago. And then wild card favorites at home of 9 or more points, 10-1 ATS. Average margin in those games is 17 points a game, median 17.5 points a game. Baltimore this season has played wins for 17, 21, 25, 25, 29, and 31 point wins already. 4 of those were against playoff teams. Baltimore is crushing teams at times. So I think you want Baltimore big here. If you look at Pittsburgh, just the way that they are losing in recent years, I don't believe I have the number in front of me here, but when they lose under Tomlin, it's often been not pretty as well. So escalator is Ravens -15.5 is +190, -20.5 +342, and all the way to the top -27.5, a 28-point Ravens win +800. I think that we might get a real blowout here.
Yeah, we're all jumping on back of the Raven and flying through the escalator. Understood. The interesting thing, I mean, listen, you're just looking for Baltimore from the regular season to show up. I mean, Lamar is 20-5 straight up in night games, 0-2 in night games in the playoffs. All you're asking for is for the regular season loose. I mean, this is a game Baltimore should absolutely dominate if looking at their resume and their portfolio from this season. But some people are just looking at the playoff stuff and saying, well, this is the Lamar we usually get. So,
yeah,
we will see what happens there. The other thing I thought was interesting, it sounds like Arthur Smith really wants to start Justin Fields in this game. If you listen to some of the things he said this week, that just can't be good for mojo there. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. All right, next game.
Wait, I got a prop in this one.
What else you got here? Oh, all right. Hit me up.
Yeah.
What do you got?
So this is the one we had from last week. Derrick Henry. I'm playing the first touchdown on Derrick Henry again. We did not hit it last week. We hit the 102. I don't like the 100 yards and 2 touchdowns as much this week just because the odds are pretty short because they're expected to win by so much this week. But similar logic to last week. Last week, they were playing Cleveland, and I was like, well, Cleveland's barely even going to score. That makes first touchdown more valuable because Baltimore is probably going to get the first touchdown as they did last week. Henry had 7 first touchdowns this season, 2 more than any other player in the league. Pittsburgh can't score. 7 touchdowns in 17 games, first touchdown. That's almost half of them. So plus 350 for Derrick Henry first touchdown if you're into the touchdown bets. And if you want, you can go with the big one here. And this is in your quick slip. Henry first touchdown, Ravens -15.5. So just rumble into the end zone, big guy. Get up early and coast. That one's plus 824 at FanDuel.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a Derrick Henry first touchdown and over first quarter yards or something like that that you can put together. Like he just breaks one early and kind of cashes your ticket. Could be a fun option. All right, Denver and Buffalo. We are on to Sunday now. So the stat you see everywhere, which everyone has tweeted out, but really starts with this game. Quarterbacks making their first playoff start versus quarterbacks with experience. They are 19-38 straight up, 19-37-1 against the spread since 2002. And the road isn't great either. 11-21, 12-19-1 against the spread. That is Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Sam Darnold. It starts with Bo Nix here in this game. So what are your thoughts on Denver Buffalo?
Yeah, we know what I think about Denver Buffalo. I was on Buffalo -7.5. I still love this at -8.5. This is just a mismatch in every way. I think this Denver team is fraudulent, to be totally honest. So here's the case why. Denver has really only one true win over a playoff team this season. That was the Bucs early in the year. Before we thought the Bucs were a playoff team, Denver against 10-win teams, and I am not counting Kansas City last week. That was not a 10-win Kansas City team. 10-win teams, they're 1-6 this season. So the offense, we know Denver's offense is the weak link on the field. Bo Nix on the road, playoff debut. I had the same stat you just did. Denver, when they've played a top 12 defense this year, you're going to hear me keep quoting that because I think that's a good way to narrow down the stats here. They've averaged 15.5 points a game. Bo Nix has been way worse this year, trailing. His QB rating goes down. His interceptions go up. His numbers have been pretty good in games where they're out ahead of teams. This is the Bills on the road as huge favorites. This is not the script you want for a rookie quarterback. More importantly, I think this defense is significantly worse than people have let on about them. Before Sunday, which again didn't count preseason game, their defense the last 6 weeks was 14th by DVOA. The defense has been way better this year protecting leads. They've been number one in the second half. They're outside the top 10 in the first half. So that to me is a front running sort of defense. That makes sense with Vance Joseph. They're bringing the pressure. They're leaving Patrick Surtain out on an island. That's great defense there. That's not what you're going to get in this game. They're also really good early downs. Buffalo has been great on third downs. Duh, Josh Allen, that's why you want the star quarterback. Denver is league average on third downs. I think there are a lot of metrics here boosted by playing bad quarterbacks and bad teams. When Denver's defense faced a top 12 offense 5 times this season, they allowed almost 29 points a game, including a 30, a 34, and a 41. Real quarterbacks have cooked this defense, and I think that that's what's going to happen this game. So, very similar to bet to what I just did with the Ravens. Bills 8.5 and the escalator. Home favorites of 9 or more. I just gave you that stat. 7 seeds are only 1 win all time. That's what Denver is here. They usually lose by a couple scores. Again, we talked about this at the top. Wildcard round, we've had wins on average by 14.5 points a game, median 16 points a game. That's why I want these escalators. I think between Baltimore and Buffalo, one or both of these games become big blowouts. The quarterback debut versus experience stat I had in here as well. Home playoff teams like Buffalo facing a team that did not make the playoffs last year this round. 22, 10, and 1 ATS, 69%. So, Bills minus 8.5, and then here's the escalator. You can get all these in your quick slip. Minus 15.5 is plus 215. That's basically shooting for that kind of average wild card round margin of victory. And then 24 points or better is plus 520. And the big one, minus 31.5, the ultimate Bo Nix disrespect, plus 1,300 for Buffalo. I think the Bills roll. I will be planning to do other things on my middle of my early Sunday afternoon because I don't think we're going to have to watch this one too close.
Yeah, I'm curious about Denver's defensive schemes a little bit here with the fact that Buffalo doesn't have like a true number one wide receiver with Surtain out there. So like how that works in terms of how they guard the receivers, try to stop Buffalo, worry about Allen. Seems like a lot going on. And I think I believe you in terms of that Denver defense. I know you have one more prop here. So what's the prop you also like in this one?
Yeah, look, if you want some Denver material here, I'll give you a Denver bet. I can't believe I'm here on this. I don't even know I've thought about this player the entire season. I'm taking Javonte Williams receiving yards. I'm taking some over escalators here. So what brought me here? Buffalo this season allowed the most receptions and yards and touchdowns receiving to running backs. This is by design. They are a zone heavy defense. They're designed to limit big plays. That leaves the check down underneath stuff. Holy cow. Bo Nix just heard the word check down somewhere and like sat up and got excited for the weekend. That's my man's game. Buffalo's allowed 10 running backs this season, at least 4 catches. They've allowed 6 of them to hit 50 yards. So why Javonte Williams? Because I know McLaughlin's been on the field more lately. Estime's been running lately. Javonte Williams, I think, will be on the field because of his experience and mostly because of his pass blocking. You look at PFF grading, McLaughlin is a terrible pass blocker, 27 grade, Estime 53. Javonte Williams is a 68 grade. That's actually a strength for his. And if you look by his snaps, his run snaps have plummeted. He is not running the ball anymore. He's not out there in run situations. His passing snaps are still solid, about 25 a game. They've not really tailed off at all. So I think Javonte Williams, in a game where I expect very pass script heavy for Denver trailing all game, I think Javonte is on the field a lot. He's at least 2 catches, all but 2 games this season, 23 receiving yards in half of them, 28 or more in 7 of them. So I don't really want too much invest in Javonte Williams because who knows about this dude in Denver. So if I'm going to play it, I'm going to play aggressively. Here's the 2 plays. 30 yards or more receiving, plus 320. 50 yards or more is 12-1. That seems crazy, but he's had 3 games this season with 48, 50, and 50 yards. And if we get a game where Denver is trailing all game and just checking it down repeatedly to that running back, protecting the blitz, getting out in the flat, I think Javonte Williams could just 7 ugly catches, 45, 50 yards, and we got a shot at a long one, 12-1 there.
Yeah, the 2 coaches with the biggest dog houses have to be Peyton and McVay. And so at any point, one of the running backs could enter the doghouse and Javonte can be getting more snaps. Now, it could be
Sure.
Javonte that enters the doghouse, but this is kind of the way you gamble here. And I think you mentioned one thing that's really crucial. It's the pass blocking. Like at some point, yeah, you're going to want to get Estime and McLaughlin carries. Javante's probably not going to get carries in this one. But if you're behind, there just probably isn't as much of a need, and it should get him
Yep.
on the field more often. All right, next game here, Packers, Eagles. The one stat I'm going to toss you here, and I found this interesting because I know we've talked a while about Eagles kind of blowing games and that being a part of something we've talked about in the past. It is interesting the fact that under Sirianni, Philly 24-2 straight up, 17-7-2 as a home favorite when leading by 7+ points at any point in the game. Pretty good. When the opponent is above 500, they're 14-0 straight up, 12-2 against the spread. So they're not blowing leads. And Hurts, we're making the assumption is going to be out there and everything looks good. I know AJ Brown didn't practice today, but that's just an anticipation to make sure he's 100%. And the other one, just leading at any point in the game. Sirianni's 50-20, minimum 20 games as a coach. That's the third best since he entered the league with Andy Reid and Sean McDermott. So obviously that's Mahomes and Josh Allen, but Sirianni and Hurts done a pretty good job themselves. So I found that intriguing, but go into it. I know this one is a little bit deeper than the other ones because there's a lot going on here. So talk to me.
Yeah, this to me is the game by far that I'm most interested in this weekend. Unfortunately, it's also the game right now that I'm most uncertain because we still
Yeah.
don't really know about Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love. We talked about Jalen Hurts, he's not cleared yet. I expect he will be. Jordan Love, kind of some weird stuff from him practicing too. We saw him kind of bang the hand and the elbow, some weird non answers there. There's a real chance, I hope we get a great game here, but there's a real chance one of these quarterbacks just isn't himself or even doesn't get to finish the game here. So I think you have to be careful about betting specifically things in this game. Other reasons too, there's just some unknowns here, more than I expected. The Packers defense has really good metrics this season, but are they real? Do they really show up against top competition here? They've been terrible covering middle of the field, but the Eagles do not like to attack middle of the field. That's not a Jalen Hurts place he lives. Packers have the fourth most turnovers force. Eagles don't turn it over much. So what happens if you're not getting those big play turnovers? Xavier McKinney was getting like one every game for a while. What if they're not there? On the flip side, Eagles offense, weirdly, might be the weak link out of the units in this game, especially the passing attack. So can they attack the Packers over the middle? Can they attack the Packers in the red zone where they've been pretty bad against the pass, but so have the Eagles? So a lot of unknown where it could kind of go either way there. Packers against playoff teams 2-5, Eagles 5-2. So that should be advantage Eagles. That's why they're clearly favored here. But a key thing too that I think will be really interesting here, strength of schedule is hugely different between these two teams. Packers played one of the hardest strength of schedules all season and actually had a pretty low variance by their games. That's good. This team was really good all year, and they were consistently good, not variant, against the really good teams. Philadelphia had one of the softest schedules all year, including the absolute easiest schedule for their defense. And we've raved about how good the defense has been, but who have they played, and have they been able to match up against a team like the Packers, who I know they played in week one, but very different teams for both of these two. So I'm going to end up playing mostly props here. We'll get into those shortly. If you want just something on a side or total here, if I had to, I would lean Packers on the money line plus 195 only because I just can't make the Packers a 2-1 underdog. I think they're too good of a team to say you're a 2-1 dog. I'd prefer to invest in who I think is going to win futures. We gave out Eagles plus 350 to win the NFC. If you like Eagles here, that odds get way better there. Jordan Love, Super Bowl MVP 36-1 if you like the Packers. So to me, taking the team you like later into the playoffs is the one that I want here. I think I might want whoever wins this game as my NFC pick. I didn't want them playing each other here, but it does buy some value. So before I get into the props that I like as my main way of play here, do you have a side or way that you'd be leaning on Packers Eagles here?
I make the game 4. So it's kind of, I mean, and there's just so many unknowns in this one that I just am really hard to know what's going on. I think both coaches are giving you a lot of fake looks
Yeah.
because I think they know that this one is really tight. I think they know that the first time they played, it was also super tight. And I think there's a lot we don't know entering this one. So in terms of like a side, I'm not necessarily wanting to lay with Philadelphia. So I do agree with you that if I was forced to do anything, I think I'd probably lean on the Green Bay side. But I do think the prop markets, as long as everyone plays, is a little more predictive.
Yeah, I agree. So I've got three props for you, all on receiving yards in this game. So first of all, we'll start with Saquon Barkley. These are all overs. You know I love to play my overs on props usually. They're just more fun that way. Let's have a little fun as bettors. The Packers allow the second most receptions to running backs on the season. That's that bad middle of the field thing coming through a little bit. Saquon Barkley's had at least 2 catches, 12 out of 16 games. So you can bet the over 1.5 receptions if you want. That's minus 170. Not my style, but he's probably going to hit that one. I'd rather play the yards because if he gets a couple catches, it's Saquon Barkley. He can chunk yards in a hurry. Even with one catch, he can bust out for a long one, get a running back wheel route up the sideline, something like that. So receiving yards, give me the over 11.5. He's at least 9 receiving yards, 11 out of 16 games, so almost 3/4 of them. He's had 20 yards or better 6 times, 40 yards or better 3 times. So I'm going to take the escalator on Saquon, over 11.5. And then 20 yards or better at plus 210, 40 or better at plus 850. I think that's one way that they can really attack the weakness of the Packers. And I know Philadelphia tends to just do what they do, but I'm kind of playing attacking weaknesses here because my other two here are zone beaters. I want zone beater receivers. So let me start with Philadelphia's, and that's Devontae Smith. Part of the thing here in this game that makes me a little queasy about Philadelphia is EPA man versus zone. Both of these teams are going to play a lot of zone. Both these teams are elite against the deep pass. They're going to try to make you earn it slowly down the field. Jalen Hurts is number 3 EPA per play against man coverage. He's number 22 against zone. That's not great for this matchup. Jordan Love's the opposite. Jordan Love is top 5 zone, number 31 against man. So why is Jalen Hurts so good against man? A.J. Brown usually is the answer. A.J. Brown is the number 1 receiver against man by PFF grade on the season. Against zone, it's Devontae. That's his guy, who's just frankly not as good as A.J. Brown. A really good receiver, but not what A.J. Brown is. So on the season against zone, A.J. Brown, 1 less target than Devontae, 48 to 49, but 33 catches to 42 for Devontae. That's the route running. That's Devontae finding the spot in the zone and making himself open and available. Against the Packers in the opener, 7 catches, 84 yards, led the Eagles in receptions in that one against this sort of zone defense. So I looked at over 5.5 receptions. That's a good number there. But I actually am going to end up playing the yards here because in games where Devontae has had 6 catches, over half of his games this year, he's averaging 86 yards a game in that one. So over 59.5, I got a huge margin for error in there rather than just 1 catch either way. And I could still go over this one even if I'm wrong about the receptions. Just give me like 1 long play. He's gone over that 2 of the games where he didn't have 6+ receptions. So no escalator here on Devontae. We'll kind of get to a different version of that in a second, but over 59.5 yards. And then last one, Jaden Reed is Green Bay zone buster. This was one of our big hits earlier this year against Minnesota. He has been horrible against man. He's great against zone. 82 grade against zone, 43 grade against man. Almost all of his production has been against zone, including in the opener against the Eagles, 4 catches, 134 yards. And the Eagles, for all the things they've done well, have not been great against wide receiver 1 by DVOA. So again, with Jaden Reed, he's faded a little bit down the stretch here, but I think it's a good matchup for him. No direct escalator on him, but over 43.5 yards for him. Just the basic over. So Reed's over 43.5, Devontae over 59.5, Saquon over 11.5, and then his escalators. And I've got 2 other versions of an escalator here that we'll get to. But any thoughts on those 3 guys?
I like where you're headed. The one bet I was thinking of as well with Jaden Reed, which I actually don't see posted yet, is I kind of want to taste of some rushing. I feel like without Watson, they're going to do a lot of different mix-ups to try to get the ball downfield. And I do feel like Reed's going to be involved in a lot of stuff because I think they're kind of out of options. Yeah. And that's kind of what they need to be doing in this one. It's the reason I like Wicks to score a touchdown. It's the reason why I'm looking for Reed rushing. I just feel like LaFleur is going to try stuff. I like the Reed thing is just, it's a little scary because there's games, and we've seen it before, where he's just gone.
Yeah.
Like he disappears from the game plan. I just don't think Green Bay can afford it. Like I just don't
Right.
think they have the weapons to ignore him. So I'm with you on that page. I know you got two more. Let's roll it through.
Yeah, so the last one here, this is the quick slip for this game. If you just like all three of those overs, the Reed over yards, Devontae over yards, Saquon over yards, you can just parlay those three together. It's basically a 5-1, plus 495 at DraftKings. That's the quick slip available. I prefer doing it a little bit more creative if you want to do it this way. You can bet the most receiving yards in the game angle. Devontae Smith is plus 380, Jane Reed is plus 750, Saquon Barkley, very unlikely to do this, but he's 140-1. He's not 140-1 unlikely to do it. So if you play all three of those together, if you do the math on the odds, you're basically betting any one of those three at about plus 200 implied. I think that should be more like minus 200. I think these three combined are, because of the matchups, because of what's available, very likely to lead this. Obviously, A.J. Brown looms large here as the obvious threat, and really, frankly, the tight ends on both teams could get some yards too. But I think we might get like a 75, 80 yards for one of these guys leads the game here. And that's why I didn't play the escalators on the receivers. I don't need the 80 to 100 yard thing. That probably leads the game anyways, and I can get this here without having to hit a huge number. So I really like that. All three guys, or if you don't want to get Saquon or don't have that crazy number available, Devontae and Jaden Reed both to lead in yards. Obviously, only one can hit, but I like the way the odds stack up for us there.
Yeah, it's a good long shot bet to kind of take because you're either going to get something or a lot from Reed or basically nothing. And also, Saquon probably shouldn't be 150-1 to basically do anything at this point in the season. All right, last game on the schedule here. So Washington and the Bucks. Now we're going to do Vikings Rams on our Sunday night recap pod, which we could talk about in a second. But Washington and Tampa Bay. I mean, this is the highest spread on the board. You got the highest total on the board. You got a bunch of defenses that have parts, but I feel like can be very easily beat. And you have two quarterbacks who are either running it downfield at an elite level or Baker passing it downfield the best he has in his career. So I do think I see the path to the over, but it is interesting nonetheless that it is the highest total.
Yeah, I wanted to do a total here, but man, there's just a lot of points looking at between these teams. Both defenses have been improving the last 6 weeks, but against not great competition. We'll see,
Yeah.
because this is pretty good competition. These have been these number 6 and number 7 offenses on the season by DVOA. I rank all the offenses before the season. I don't know what I have these two teams, but I promise you it was not 6th or 7th. It was outside the top 20, I would guess. Two of the biggest surprises on the season, not the defense. The defense have not been surprising. So yeah, I think we're going to get a high scoring game. I think it's the highest scoring game of the weekend. I saw someone suggest to me Washington highest scoring team of the weekend. If you like Washington, I think that's a good creative way to bet them here. I also think this could be a back and forth sort of game. If you're a live better, I think you might be able to just bet one side that's the underdog, then they take the lead, and you bet the other side that's the underdog, and you're out. You can just rest easy, take the money lines, and just come out ahead whichever team comes out, especially because here's some of the numbers. Bucs second half, 13-4 against the spread. Washington first half, 10-7 against the spread. Washington's way better defensively early. Bucs are way better defensively late. Bucs offense, top 5 in the first quarter. Bucs defense, bottom 5 in the second quarter. Washington offense, top 5 in the second quarter. So I just think we're going to get high variance. We got a rookie quarterback. We got Baker. We're going to get a back and forth game. All that said, this is the one game I'm just picking a straight spread on, Bucs -3. And to me, I think the injury report actually looms pretty large here. Antoine Winfield back is really big news for Tampa Bay. He's been not great this season, but really important to them for a secondary that's been pretty awful, and for safeties that everybody's been injured. So I think that's a huge swing, not just one player, but the way he organizes that defense and gets them going. So him on the field, and then Washington, Tyler Biadasz and Cornelius Lucas, two of their linemen, are both limited still. And that offensive line got reworked this year, was pretty good early, and has really struggled late. We've talked about Jane Daniels eating a lot of sacks down the stretch. So to me, those injuries combined with Marshawn Lattimore is still kind of a question mark. That is about a 0.7 points move toward the spread. And we're sitting right at 3. That puts the Bucs closer to 4 for me rather than the other direction below the key number. So that's why I like this one. I think Bucky Irving can get some running game, test the Washington defense. And then frankly, I just trust the Bucs more here. They're 4-3 against playoff teams. Washington is 1-4. Washington against top 10 offenses this year, their defense has allowed 33 points a game. That's going to be tough here. And then, frankly, got to have his name in here. I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury. Give me Liam Cohen over Cliff Kingsbury, and give me Todd Bowles' defense against Cliff Kingsbury. And then some of the trends we've talked about already fit here as well. That experienced quarterback against a debut quarterback, 66% ATS. Home playoff team against a non-playoff team from last year, 69% ATS. Home rematch. These teams played week one. Tampa Bay won convincingly, 37-20. Teams that won by 14 or more rematch at home, 73% ATS. To me, this is just the best trend spot of the weekend. So Bucks -3. And because I love my escalators, we mentioned kind of the back and forth nature. If you think Washington hangs around, Washington first half, Bucks full time, plus 612, I think is a bad number for a game that could go back and forth a lot. So I've got one prop here to close us out, but that's my one main side here Sunday night. I think it should be a fun one.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed some of the bets I was thinking of because this is the one. I mean, I said earlier I liked Washington. So this would be the one side I really felt comfortable betting an underdog pregame, assuming I was going to get the other side as the underdog live.
Yeah.
And this is probably the game I feel the most confident in that in. I mean, I think the other example would be Chargers Texans with that same kind of line. And I don't feel as comfortable in that game as I do with this one. So I do like the live on both sides. I think you could play that Washington full game. I'm Washington first half, Tampa full game, but also do first quarter. I think there's probably a few ways to probably do that. Interesting enough, the last rookie to win a road game in the playoffs was Russ in 2013, 2012, 2013. And overall, they're 5-14 straight up on the road in the playoffs since 1990. So not great there. I believe they've lost 7 in a row. I think Jaden's a little bit different. But the one thing I will say is in terms of exactly your prop here, I do think there's an avenue because of the linemen. And I do think missing the linemen or having injured linemen or inexperienced linemen will lead to your prop. So give it away.
Yeah, I'm looking for Jane Daniels rushing overs here. So we're taking the escalator because I think Jane Daniels, the one thing we've seen from him, even coming into the NFL, the book on him was he scrambles too much. He scrambles too often. He's going to get blown up in the NFL. Well, he hasn't gotten blown up. He's blown up the NFL instead. But I think that we've seen by the numbers, he tucks the ball and runs way too often still without hanging in the pocket. He's going to get better at that over the time. But in this game, Washington's failing offensive line against Todd Bowles. What's Todd Bowles going to do? He's going to bring the blitz for sure. We know that's what he does. So here we have pressure coming at Jane Daniels. What does he do? He tucks the ball and runs. And frankly, does a pretty good job of it too. So I think you want him on the ground here. We saw already in the opener, Washington played Tampa Bay, the first game of Jane Daniels' career. What happened? He got pressured. He tucked the ball and run. He had 16 carries for 88 yards and 2 scores in that game. The Bucs have allowed the top 3 most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They allowed the second most quarterback rushing touchdowns. It's not just Daniels. Bo Nix, a couple weeks after Daniels, 9 carries, 47 yards, and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts ran 8 times, got a touchdown. Lamar Jackson, 9 rushes, 52 yards. So the lines, I think, caught on to this a little bit. 8.5 attempts, 48.5 yards. I was like, darn it. That's like about where I thought these maybe should be. So, as always, that doesn't scare me away. That just makes me be more aggressive. So here's the escalator. Couple different ways to be creative here. I'll take the over 48.5 rushing yards. I think that's about the right line, but I think you can do that. That's at FanDuel -114. 80 yards or more plus 430. That's in your quick slip if you want those two on the yardage. I also like a touchdown here. That's obviously a rushing or receiving touchdown. We'll take how we get it. But I like that for him. Remember, he did that twice in the first matchup, plus 185 on the touchdown. And then a little bit of a long shot here. 15 attempts or more is 14-1. Again, he had 16 against them in the opener. He had 16 in one other game as well. Week 16 against the Falcons. That kind of a playoff setting. When it's all on the line, what are you going to do? When it's on the line for Jane Daniels, he runs. And in case you're right about Washington winning, we'll take a couple kneels at the end and get over our rushing attempts too. However we got to get there, we'll take it. Jane Daniels rushing escalator to close us out.
I like it. I just feel like he's going more than Bo Nix in that situation. This is going to be a tighter game. He's going to feel the need to, run the ball down the field. I think Eckler and Robinson at times can be fine, but also I can completely see them changing the game plan and kind of going just with Daniels all out here, which is the reason why some of those props we talked about earlier I thought had some value to it from a Washington point of view if you like them in this game. The other one is Eckler's definitely going to throw him a touchdown. I can see that happening already. Eckler to Jaden Daniels, that's how you catch the bet. All right, moving on here. So Minnesota and the Rams, we are going to do that recap on the Sunday night pod, which me and Brandon do every week. So we will talk about that game. We will break it down just like we did here. And that's it. That is the pod. So we have given you best bets for all 5 of the wild card games leading up to that Monday nighter. We've talked about futures in the first podcast in terms of Super Bowl and conference. This one, we kind of went through all the props and different avenues. So this has been the wild card weekend best bets episode. Do not forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app to see more from all of our Action Network contributors. Plus, you can track your own picks. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. Chop it up with our experts. I'm in there. Nick Giffin's in there. Sean Kerner's in there. We're all hanging out, chatting during games. So there's a link to join in the description of this podcast. Plus, if you want to tell some of the bets we gave out today, again, make sure to check out the description for the quick slip link in the episode. We will be back Sunday night for the recap pod. Thanks for listening. Good luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy 5 days in football paradise. See you later, everybody.